It is in progress. The record is progressing as planned. Okay. How's your voice? You want to do
One
it?
second.
Oh, before we get rolling too far, I guess look at the just read the prologue and the opening narration and the closing one together, I guess.
Oh, okay. I was gonna
Because
do a bit, but it doesn't matter. I can
if
do
you
both.
okay, I was gonna do because the last one is actually the one that explains the story. The first one just explains what it is.
Yeah, it also the first one doesn't end with Twilight Zone, which makes it kind of awkward.
Yeah, right. So yeah, because I just feel like the closing actually is um, you know, the real one for
Okay.
once. Yeah. Okay. Are you ready to do this?
Yep.
Hello, welcome to Assist the Temps podcast, where we talk about all of the episodes of La Quatrième Dimension and beyond.
Bonjour.
Yeah, and sorry, we're neither of us, this being Matt here, the regular guy who's here every week, that being Mark there, the guy that's here every, what, fourth week ish.
Je suis the guy who is here, how you say, every fourth week.
Yeah, be ready for us to just give horrible anglicized pronunciations of anything French looking, because I haven't had a second of French instruction. I don't know about you.
Oh, 3 years, but that
Oh, well,
was
yeah,
forever ago.
that's okay.
Forever ago.
Well,
Doesn't
that's
matter.
ahead of me. That's ahead of me, right?
Okay.
That's the
Haha.
weird, that's the thing
Now
about
I'm the head of
French.
the podcast.
If you look at a book, because we have so many borrowed words, you can kind of figure out what a French thing's talking about a little bit when you look at a page in French. But if someone's speaking it to you, it's just like goodbye. The
And
pronunciation.
they took our story first. This is an American story.
An American story. That's right. Okay, but I'm not going to do it in that accent. Is that maybe that's what this guy? I mean, doesn't really talk, right? Because it's mostly silent. The only spoken words are from the Union soldiers, is it?
Yeah, and a lot of those are sort of weirdly slowed down or off screen or something.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that was cool. So this guy may talk like this, and if he opened his mouth, you'd like lose most of your sympathy for him.
They'd probably be like, "Well, I do declare, I certainly have a large plantation where I do evil."
An occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. It is missing some foghorn leghorn. I'll give you that. We could have had a bit more of that.
I say, boy, I'm doing some evil on this bridge.
This is one where I think I actually did watch it in my high school literature class, and that's where I saw it. I mean, I guess we probably watched the original version, like not the Twilight Zone version, but
Never seen it.
yeah, because we read the story, and then my teacher put on the movie, which if anyone we were talking before recording about like what was edited, and it seems the original movie's 28 minutes, the Twilight Zone's 25, which includes a bit of rod and credits. So I'm guess they cut 3 minutes out somewhere.
The only Ambrose Bierce I've ever read is the Devil's Dictionary, and just glancing at it, the definition for Adam's apple is a protuberance on the throat of a man thoughtfully provided by nature to keep the rope in place.
Huh. Okay.
I loved it when I was a kid when I read this, even though most of it went over my head. But I just like I'm pretty good at just inferring what things are supposed to mean. So I
Yeah, I'm
just sort of
assuming that I read some Ambrose Pierce in high school since we were watching this. That usually goes in conjunction with reading some stuff too, right? So, but it's not like an author where it's stuck in my mind, like and maybe I continue to read them or whatever. So, not that there's necessarily anything wrong with it. The one weird thing that I found like growing up or going through high school at least was it was kind of like if books were written more than 60 years, the language would get real rough, right? Like Victorian language or stuff like that, or and then you'd be like, oh, I'm going to read foreign books because they're translated into modern English. So go
yeah.
read Greek plays were like easier for me than like Charles Dickens because it was a more modern translation.
I definitely the one I remember having trouble with was the Canterbury Tales. I think that was sort of the line for me, and that what was that like 1350 or something like that. That was
Well, and
very
also, how are you reading?
old.
If you're reading that in pure
Uh,
Middle English, yeah, it's not an easy read at all. So you can
mm,
translate that. It's like Beowulf. If you try and read original Beowulf,
yeah.
you're not going to understand any of that.
Well, I don't think I think it was translated in enough, but not I don't know.
So is this
Yeah,
your first
you
time
can't.
hanging out at Owl Creek Bridge?
Yep,
Then
first time
okay, okay.
and the
Uh,
last time.
Now, in a weird thing, you said you were going to request at one point, and then it had a different guest, and then a series of events led it back to you. Why were you
Wait, I
originally?
said I was going to request this?
I think you had an
No,
inch. Oh
I
no,
did. I was interested in doing it, but I did not. I did not request it. I saw it and was like, "That's interesting."
right. Well, yeah, no, you didn't. I just like, but it ended
There you
up in
go.
your lap anyway. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Okay.
it was like that's interesting. It was interesting to me the origin of it, but also that it was extremely highly rated episode. So I'm like, oh, probably good.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead
Peop-
and do that trivia then and lay all that out. The original air date was February 28th, 1964. This was actually a short film created along with a couple of other Ambrose Bierce stories, adapted for the screen and directed by Robert Enrico. It won awards at Cannes and the Academy Awards in 1961, so this is a bit of a reappropriation rerun. And this is actually the end of the Twilight Zone. They're one episode short, and Rod, just bought this for, I guess we decided $20,000 was the correct number plus 5,000 for editing. Yeah. Uh,
Yep.
so, and that saved enough budget because producing one of these episodes is 100,000 plus. So, ABC, not ABC, no ABC. Okay, ABC offered to pick up for a sixth season, but they wanted what? You told me a mess of horror, right? And that wasn't really what Rod wanted, although he
So I
kind of,
guess wait, ABC was going to pick it up from CBS. Is that the deal?
I
That's what
guess.
it looked like.
Yeah, that this prompted ABC to because I was sitting there like, wait, CBS, and then no ABC, but yeah, he would make it ABC for Night Gallery, which we'll eventually cover here anyway. So, and that one
Yep.
I guess tends to be a little bit more supernatural and horror-ish than the Twilight Zone, but not overwhelmingly so, I think. But most of those make sense as Twilight Zones, except in color. Anyway, that's how this ended up on the Twilight Zone. He went to LA, filmed his opening and closing stuff and cut a few minutes, send it out. English redub, apparently. Coming out in
Yep.
1960s France, I don't have much on the actors, so I guess I'll just list them and probably mispronounce half their names in the process.
Yay.
Roger Jacques played Peyton Farquhar, and Annie Cornely played his wife Abby. The Union soldiers were Anchor Spang Larson. I'm sure I'm saying that completely wrong. Anchor Spang Larson. I don't know. I don't know. Stefan Fay, Pierre Danny, Louis Adelin. And, sorry if I got those wrong. I don't know how many of those folks are still with us. Anyway,
Well, the star Roger Jacquet. I'm just gonna
maybe.
guess he died in 2014. So
Oh,
you could
okay.
just click on his name.
He lasted a
He
while.
was in Le Betard.
Yeah,
That's the bastard.
I didn't really feel like delving deep into the French film industry for this. I mean, you can, or, new wave, great, sure, but I'm not. That would have been more things that I'd be mispronouncing on this podcast.
Au cœur de la vie.
So what
That's
did
like
I
the
do?
heart of life, I think.
So I went straight for jazz legend Kenny Clark. I can understand that. He participated on the soundtrack, which was composed by Henry Lanoue. He is the one bashing the skins during the Forest Run sequence and singing that Living Man or involved in that Living Man tune. I don't know if he actually sang it. Whatever. Um,
Hmm.
he appeared on numerous classic albums, including Miles Davis' Bebop Run and early recordings of the Modern Jazz Quartet. His name is on at least two of my T-shirts. By the 1960s, he had run off to France, and that is pretty much why you hear him here. He was, France loved jazz, so they'd have American expats and like tour them around Europe and stuff. And that was probably, I mean, I'm a guy that shuffled off to Japan, so whatever, I get it, makes sense. Discs Vogue, there's a couple of, CD jazz box sets of Discs Vogue, one of which is mostly European jazz artists. One of them is mostly where they would drag American jazz cats off to Paris and have them record a set.
Hmm.
And that is the trivia. So, this is a weird opening narration in that it's just explains the production. So, um, I get it's like the closing narration is kind of like the opening narration. Anyway, I'm going to put that on your plate and see what you do with it, I guess.
Well, there's only one way for From my angle, there's only one way to do this. Tonight, a presentation so special and unique that for the first time in the 5 years we've been presenting The Twilight Zone, we're offering a film shot in France by others. Winner of the Cannes Film Festival of 1962, as well as other international awards. Here is a haunting study of the incredible from the past master of the incredible, Ambrose Bierce. Here is the French production of An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. An occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge in two forms, as it was dreamed and as it was lived and died. This is the stuff of fantasy, the thread of imagination, the ingredients of the Twilight Zone.
Okay, I'm not quite sure what you were doing. I'm trying to work through my mind.
Oh,
So,
I was the point of that was that he was doing the most candid, like, here we are, so I was just gonna make it as evil as possible.
okay, what I felt is you were doing the Club Silencio guy from Mulholland Drive,
Sure.
which we just watched. So maybe subliminally that did stick in your mind as a evil way to present something.
No, I was actually looking up, like, I was trying to look up the music that always plays in trailers that's like classical music where it goes like dun 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 dun. I was gonna like play that behind me, but I couldn't figure out what that was.
Oh, okay. Well, I can see what I could do. If you tell me, I can post it.
Sure, I'll just
Post
sing it to
prod.
you when I'll sing it to you when we're done, I guess.
Okay, that's gonna be horrible. You know, it's probably one of those bits of soundtracks where it's like from a really crap movie, but that one piece of music stuck. Like doesn't the 13th Warrior have a bit of that? Like it's got some of that music they stick in like every trailer, but nobody likes that movie. I mean, maybe two people like that movie, but you know
Yeah,
'em? Yeah. There's
I
a
don't
few
know.
cases of
I
that
think
where
it's more famous. I think it is a piece of music that is not from a movie.
right. No, I'm just thinking about trailer music. Like sometimes the super overused trailer music is from a film that flopped, which is always interesting.
Mhm.
So how was
Well,
the short film for you? I don't think we could call
oh,
this a film that flopped or anything.
no, I loved this. This is great. I really thought it was great. I would have. I'm This is one of those. Well, I probably would not have taken the time out to watch this if it wasn't for the Twilight Zone putting it in front of me. So, thanks, Rod Serling.
Well, yeah, I guess that's the whole point of this because yeah, there's enough prestige on this. Oh, won Cannes, it won an Oscar. Yeah, sure, why not? If we can get it for $20,000. Um, what are other shows that took something from something else completely? I guess only anthology shows can do that, really.
Um, Damn, there's something that's just stuck in my brain.
I
It's
mean,
not.
there's
I
there's
can't.
weird stuff like off-brand monsters going to Marineland between seasons one and two of the Monsters. You know that happened, but
Yeah.
that's a special. That's a little different. It is about the same time as this, though, a year or two later. So,
Mm.
and I don't think that was presented as like an episode of the Monsters anyway. Like, it was like a special. So, why
Hmm.
is the first thing I think of comparing Owl Creek Bridge with is the Monsters anyway? I don't get that.
TV series that inserted films into. This isn't gonna work.
Yeah, it's too specific a search, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and search engines are worse than they've ever been.
I guess there's enough here to make it a proper Twilight Zone. We have a proper twist ending. We have great cinematography. I was looking up a bit on the cinematographer, but I just again it was like a bunch of French films that I'm not familiar with, so I kind of gave up. His name was what? Let's see, Jean Buffety. I guess again, I have no
Hmm.
clue if I'm pronouncing any of these names correctly.
Do you want me to help you?
Not, I mean, whatever.
Now I sound like a cocky
Yeah,
garbage
you
person.
already told me you forgot about your French. I'm like, I don't know what help that's gonna be, man.
Jean Buffety, probably.
Yeah,
Jean
okay.
Buffety.
Anyway, that's the first thing that hit me watching this. Like, we have like actual like film quality stuff where the Twilight Zone can be very good, but it always has that, workman approach. It's like the guy that made a bunch of like really top flight B movies in the 40s and 50s, and he's, at the end of his career, and he could do this. That's what usually happens in the Twilight Zone. This one's a little more ambitious and a little more, out of the studio and off of the sound stages and such.
Hmm. Well, yeah, it's all, a lot of it's underwater, which is don't see a low. Whoa, man. I was saying a cinematographer for a very title I very much cannot say.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm not going to help you with that
Okay.
then.
No, that's not good. Pronouncing that isn't going to help anyone.
Anyway,
In fact, no one look it up.
this is the best like filmed episode of the Twilight Zone, I think, because usually it's like something like The Obsolete Man with crazy weird, minimalist sets or something like that. I mean, the Invaders was filmed pretty well, but this is still kind of, this is more of an art film, which the Twilight Zone never is.
Well, I mean, I don't know. We're what, 50 years away from TV and movie being like not as distinctly different. Like TV and movies are two different things. The only thing that's similar is that they aren't filming things on videotape yet, except for those, 3 episodes where they did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now it's just TV shows. They run what, 10 episodes a season. It's just a movie that's too long for the
I mean,
most
I
part.
wouldn't look at it like that. I would look at it more like there's no filler. I know you're against short seasons. I like them for the most part.
Yeah, you get more stupid and weird episodes when you let it go 24 episodes. So now you have to meet the genie or something at some point, you know?
Yeah, it's not like I resent, you know, episodes of Deep Space Nine where they're just like screwing around with the Grand Nagus or whatever, but it's you can get a good story out of 10 episodes.
Season one, it's about a sitcom about a lawyer and his family, but by season six, they're living on the planet Trantor or something, because of plot machinations or whatever.
Yeah, well, people get bored after the 350 episodes that were in those 6 seasons.
Right, right. So anyway, my point is when you have long TV, you get weird episodes in the Twilight Zone. It's going what, 36 episodes a season, which is insane.
Yeah. That cuts both ways though, doesn't it? Like
It does cut both ways.
they're definitely about five to 10 episodes in this season that I could probably chuck into a off a bridge and nobody would care about,
True, true. But I mean, hey, if you're really into the show, sometimes some of those episodes really grab you. Like, I mean, in Star Trek, I'm an ardent Trekkie, and I love the Voyager episode Threshold. I love TNG's Sub Rosa. Even watching, I mean, I know it's crap watching it, but it's crap I enjoy.
Well, those specific examples, those aren't the good examples for the ones that you would get rid of. The ones that you would get rid of are the ones that were you forget them,
The ones
because
that like
there's definitely ones that you've probably
infantilize
forgotten
Harry
about.
Kim from Voyager. Maybe you just forget about the favorite son. There's one to
Yeah,
forget about. So yeah, it cuts both ways, like you say, but it's fun for it to cut both ways sometimes. Which when you
yeah.
have 10 episodes, that's all you get. And we will see the 10
I mean,
episode run for the more modern Twilight Zone at some point. So
well, also, I mean, I don't know if Voyager was a 10 episode per season series, you would probably every time that you had Neelix and Tuvok together, they would be like, "I was inside you."
that was weird, wasn't
Yeah, they would
it?
keep doing that. Whereas, they wouldn't do that back then. They wouldn't bring stuff back up. But
I was inside you. I
every
was
time they were,
inside you.
every time every time they're paired off, I was like, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. They never
And
did.
it'll never get talked about. That's
We'll
right.
never talk about it again. I
Um,
think
but
at the time they probably hated that episode, like the people who
I
made the series.
think people
Um,
still have a love-hate relationship with that episode.
I mean,
Tuvix, if you're not a crazy Trekkie.
yeah, I didn't think it was a great episode, but it's fun to talk about.
Oh
Same
yeah.
same deal.
How about an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge? We're back in the Civil War. I'm not. I mean, there are some pretty good Twilight Zones in the Civil War, but it's not my favorite default setting, I guess. I guess what Still Valley and the Witch Man is my high water mark. But not filmed as well as this again. So
Was Jezebel during the Civil War?
I don't
Or was
know.
that before
Maybe.
Civil War?
It's
Who
hard to
knows?
say. It has the tone though. That's more, but that's the slightly more like
Let's
hillbilly nonsense strain of the Twilight Zone, which is close to the Civil
yeah.
War strain.
Well,
Like when we did the Seventh is Made Up of Phantoms a month or two ago, it was like I kept calling it a Civil War thing. I was like, well, it's not really a Civil War because this is it'd be 1880s. Is that when the battle was Little Bighorn?
I was just thinking that was more about like the people from now or from the 60s than it was about the You
Yes.
don't really see anything about the old whatever the ghosts. They're
Yeah.
just ghosts. So
Um,
it's like you can't like if you have a story with the Victorian ghost, it's not a story about Victorian era anything. Anyway,
right. Okay, 1876, which I think I said in that episode, so slightly, but it's after the Civil War is my point. This, of course, is
yep.
full on a Civil War episode. The IMDb trivia listed as being April 4th, 1862.
Hmm.
So early on in the war, I guess this guy is being executed for screwing with the rails,
Oh,
sabotaging the
you didn't read
railroad.
stuff about the actual story because there's a bunch of stuff that is not really in the movie
Okay,
is
go
in the
for that.
story.
Like I said, yeah, I kind of came in like I read the story at some point in time, but yes, that was 30 years ago almost. So, why don't you take a moment for that?
Well, basically the guy who we see getting hanged is terrible. For one thing. He's a wealthy planter and slave owner, and he was like trying to blow up the bridge because wait, there's something about he was. It's hard to search through this wiki thing. Bridge.
Yeah, sabotage. But yeah, he was okay. That was the one thing
Oh,
that's and maybe I did remember it from reading the story a while back. But yeah, when you first see the vision of him running to his wife Abby, I was kind of sitting there like, is this the bad? Is this Leonardo DiCaprio from Django Unchained, basically?
yeah, they didn't show the slaves. Basically,
Right,
it's like
right.
they
But I
just
was
show that there were. I don't know if I don't know why that was the editorial choice they made because if you watch this with no context, you might be like, "Oh, this poor man being executed for." It shows you the sign at the very beginning that's like anyone seen tampering with a bridge will be executed.
yeah, I
That's
guess
like the only
that's
thing you get.
well that was enough for me to remember, or maybe I just got it from that, right? I was like, oh, he must have been
Yeah,
tampering with the bridge. So
yeah.
it is another thing. I mean, in the early '60s, especially, you would still have, like there are Twilight Zones that kind of have Confederates as the protagonists, right? Which people tend not to do these days so much.
So okay, Farquhar, a supporter of the Confederacy, learns from a Confederate soldier that the Union troops have seized the Owl Creek Railroad Bridge and repaired it. This is a flashback. The soldier suggests that Farquhar might be able to burn the bridge down if he could slip past its guards. He then leaves, but doubles back after nightfall to return north the way he came. The soldier was actually a disguised Union scout who has lured Farquhar into a trap, as any civilian caught interfering with the railroads will be hanged. Yeah, that's a big old chunk of story they didn't put in there.
But I don't think as a short film it needs that. I mean, that's kind of part of the
Yeah.
interpretation. One, it is kind of interesting to leave it ambiguous because if the guy's just a scumbag, that's, again in a story form that's good, but in a film form, it's hard to really square that circle.
Yeah, it would if this was produced as a Twilight Zone episode, we would definitely have gotten that. So like yeah, that's yeah, I agree it's like more about the guy dying than about like what kind of person he was.
Right, right. And then, the fake out and all of that sort of thing. So I guess that's the point of the film version to keep it a little ambiguous, keep it a little arty, I've mentioned several times that La Jetée, that would have made sense for Rod Serling to purchase for 20,000 bucks too and stick on.
Sure.
That might be a little too disturbing for 60s American television, but
I think it I don't think it's that. I think it would have been people would have been like, why is it just a slideshow? Why isn't it moving?
yeah, this one's a little more palatable to a primetime audience, I guess, is maybe why you choose this one. That said, I do like La Jetée is like one of my favorite things ever. So this
That's great.
film does not stack up to that, although it does make a very
Hmm.
good Twilight Zone episode.
Well, it's like I'm reading further down the Wikipedia article on the film, which is very long, and it's like it says it was an inspiration for David Lynch films, which makes sense, but also Jacob's Ladder, which was obviously, you know, very obvious to me. I don't know if you've seen Jacob's Ladder, but
But 30 years ago.
anyway,
I do remember liking
yeah,
it.
Jacob's Ladder is pretty. I don't want to spoil the 30-year-old movie, but um, it's got similarities with it, and also Brazil.
I am looking at my notes here, and yeah, I guess I was watching him more sympathetically. That's why I said or that's why I was saying when he has the visions of getting home, that's when I had my thought of, wait a minute, is this guy actually a scumbag? Because my notes are like, oh, it's lucky for Peyton that 1860s firearms were still pretty inaccurate. You got the Living Man song, it's like kind of trying to add a bit of I guess sympathy to the character. He's a living man. He's living, man.
That
Uh,
reminded me of like Malcolm Mooney can stuff,
Oh
like
yeah,
some
yeah,
slower
yeah.
ones.
She's whatever the rain, yeah,
Yeah.
along those lines. So it was kind of weird. I mean, it's not really. I mean, do you put Civil War era music in, or a vocal jazz ballad's kind of a weird choice. But now once Clark is bashing those drums and Peyton's running around the forest, that's great. I know that's also anachronistic, but that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Possibly more anachronistic.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could have a guy. Well, I don't know. You
Well,
got
I guess you could have a guy
guys with
playing the
you got the
drums.
little drummer boy, but the drummer he doesn't have a trap set.
Yeah, that was like an insane drum solo.
Something else I thought of watching this was the 1930s Charlie Chaplin films, City Lights, Modern Times. If you haven't seen them already, you're about to for other podcasts. But
Yeah.
yeah, they're silent films with a soundtrack. They have music, they have sound effects, they even might have a word or two. Chaplin sings a song, so it's kind of interesting when you make a film that's a silent film with a soundtrack, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But I thought it was very interesting when there were a couple of parts where the guys were just slow motion, like yelling, but it slowed down, like roar, roar.
Oh
Like
yeah, that's great. Speaking of
that
things that
is,
David Lynch put in his films.
yeah. I'd imagine at least a few people did write into CBS being like, why did my TV do this? Why is the
Right.
devil in my TV?
I mean, I don't know. Does he have to go through all this hell to convince himself of the fantasy? Because I feel like if you're having a fantasy, you'd have a better time of it. Um, have you seen Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ?
Yes.
Because the big controversy in that movie was basically that Jesus has a vision of like living a normal life, right? And they're like, no, and
Yeah.
so some people are like, no, you can't do that. But like his was much more, he had a much nicer fantasy than Peyton here, which is running through the forest barefoot, going down white water, dealing with water snakes and all that crap. This is a crap fantasy.
Yeah, and then that thing where you're running towards your wife and you just keep running and you're not
And then
quite
your neck
there and you're not
snaps.
quite there and then you're like, and he's like, oh, there's something. God, it's just like on the tip of my brain where there's something like this where someone's hallucinating and they just immediately die, and it's killing me. I cannot remember what it is.
There's always that scene from The Matrix where a Cypher unplugs them all.
Well, yeah, but
It
there's
made me think
something
of
something
that.
specifically like this where someone is hallucinating and then they just immediately die.
Into
And
the
it cuts to
Void.
them immediately dying. No, that was a very slow, actually.
Yeah,
That
it
was the
takes like what two
slowest
and a
death in
half
the world.
hours in
Takes
that
the
case,
entire
doesn't it?
film.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But that's the difference between a 28-minute film and a 2 hour plus film, huh?
Yep.
But yeah, sorry, I guess I'm not recalling what you're thinking of. But yeah,
Yeah,
anyway,
it's freaking me out because I'm
I
just
was
like,
just
ah,
like,
I
do
could
you
see it.
do you need the pain to try and make the fantasy realistic? Because if it did snap and no one shot him, he just got out and strolled down the lane, would that be too unconvincing for someone?
I just considering I've never been hanged. I don't know. I don't know if you have.
No, I haven't been hanged.
Considering the response to things like your human body's response to like the threat of death. Like, have you ever done something like accidentally cut yourself like a little bit too deep and then your adrenaline kicks in and you're
Oh.
suddenly like very, very, very present?
Um, I don't think I've done that. I have accidentally been rock climbing without any safety equipment.
But like,
It was
yeah,
like
but
we were
did you
walking
like
down the
hurt
beach.
yourself?
We were like
I'm talking
walking
about
down.
hurting yourself.
Let's see. Well, yeah, I told you last August. I did some sidewalk diving and ripped apart
Yeah.
and did some notable damage to my knee and elbow. So, and the knee, yeah, the knee it had, it was deep and had gravel. So yeah, it was in that I was like, that's deep and nasty,
Did
deep
you
and nasty.
didn't you feel like you were kind of more present after that happened than I feel like the idea of like
Well, I do make a note
disappearing.
of being present all the time, but
Sure.
not all the time, but
Okay,
I have
disappearing.
everyday presentness. I try for that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, sure, me too. Especially now that I'm not drinking anymore. But yeah, the whole I'd feel like your actual response to being hanged would be anything except for disappearing into a fantasy. I feel like you would be just like, oh, you know what I mean? Like that's just that
Okay, well,
I
this
guess I'm
is
nitpicking, being like
we're
that's
looking at the
unrealistic.
maybe what you're talking about is the light flashing before your eyes moment,
I guess,
which to me is a little different than being present, right? I mean, but yeah, your light flashing before your eyes, I guess, works.
but that doesn't
But
make
he's
sense
having
because
it's
his life
different.
wasn't. Yeah, his life wasn't. He gets away and then runs more and then gets shot at.
His life was boring, so he fantasized instead.
Yeah, I guess you
If
could look at it like that.
if he let his life flash before his eyes, he's going to be the bad guy in Django Unchained.
Yeah, it's just like he just thinks back to all the fun he had torturing people.
Yeah.
Yay.
I mean that really is going to color the questions that we're going to be getting to in a few minutes, though. Like, do we take what's in the story, or do I guess we just have to consider what's on screen, don't we?
I suppose
I don't know.
that makes it harder.
It does. Well, that's why I'm already putting out that second question is going to be a little difficult when we get to it. Um,
Yeah.
do you have any other observations here before we get to that?
Um
On the slowed down voices, by the way, I did write down the note. Why is Bane now issuing orders? So, fire. we,
was
we, we
that
don't
was the
have our
most
best Bane
noticeable.
impressionist here.
Yeah, that was the most notable like time that they used a French accent.
Hmm.
Or get him, he's getting away. How you say he run?
Yeah, the by the way, the IMDb goof section was like it's not a goof that they have French accents because a lot of French moved into Louisiana prior to the Civil War.
I need to get an IMDb account so I can vote that unhelpful.
Right. Um, let's see. So yeah, so I guess I'll start doing some questions then.
Okay.
Oh, also they stole his watch. That seems is that stealing if you're about to execute someone and you take their watch?
Um,
They're gonna
I
be dead
don't
in a minute,
know.
most
I
likely,
guess
unless
it
the rope
is.
breaks and they run off
I
to
guess
their
it's
wife.
like if you take it off of him after he's dead, then you're grave robbing. But if you steal it while he's alive, you're stealing.
Okay, so it's theft either case. That's all I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and my first one, well, one of my early notes here is just like baller sound design. I guess that also makes a through line with the Lynch because this is definitely something where you're noticing the sound design and they put a whole lot of thought into it.
Yeah.
So
And
that's cool.
almost,
Like what before this really, maybe that's one of the innovations of this movie, really owning the sound design.
I don't, I mean, I have very little experience seeing like French short films from this era. There could be a lot of, there could have been like 100 of these for all I know.
Well, I mean, going back, like Citizen Kane, great soundtrack, sounds great, doesn't have like this kind of sound design, you know?
Yeah.
I
I
mean, it
mean,
probably wasn't technically possible in 1940.
probably not.
Disney had
I don't
trouble
know.
getting Fantasia sounding right around that time, so they're like, you
You
have to
got
spend a ton of money to re-engineer your theater or play this movie properly.
that was so early, and you have to sit there and be like, what is the, be like, what is the history? Oh, okay. Wait, feeling mistakes. I was looking at the French thing, and it
Mark's
looks
gotten
like
distracted.
a lot of people found that unhelpful. So maybe I don't
Oh,
have to.
okay.
Um, uh, sorry. Yeah, I think if you'd have to look at a history of like sound technology, because you couldn't even use. There were no four tracks when this came
I
out, right?
I am in the middle of a book about film music, but I am currently they're talking about the mid 30s. I'm up to about the mid 30s now, so maybe, And if maybe in a few weeks I'll have more for you as I move through that book. It's a really thick book and kind of a slow read. I'm always reading a few books at the same time, and I'm like, this one's going to take a while. It's
Well, the term sound designer only dates back to 1979.
okay. So that definitely puts this one as an early adopter of really owning it.
Well, that I mean, they didn't own it because there's no one credited as a sound designer because
They didn't know what that was, right?
they didn't know what it
So
was. They were doing something. Was it a Foley guy? Maybe it's just the director himself had to do it
yeah,
all.
I don't know. I guess let's do our questions.
Hmm.
Rod calls it the Twilight Zone, so I guess we accept that it's the Twilight Zone. So,
Sure.
who in this episode travels in or through the Twilight Zone?
I mean, clearly Rod Serling traveled to the Twilight Zone to purchase this film. Now, yeah, Farquhar went to the
Yeah,
Twilight Zone.
when the entire episode is from one guy's POV, that's your choice, isn't it? Where there's not really another
Yeah,
in his fantasy POV, you know? I keep
yeah,
calling him Peyton, by the way, because I know if I try saying his last name, I'm going to say Farquaad, like in Shrek. Farquaad.
yeah.
There we go. I got it out. Okay. But yeah, this is kind of like on the easier side of that question. But like we said, that makes question two really difficult. Does he deserve it? He did. I mean, did he read the sign?
I'm gonna say, yeah. that's that's my gut feeling. Not if even if I discount the idea that I know he was a plantation guy.
Mm.
Like it seems pretty obvious that he was probably a Confederate guy
Yeah, I
and that
mean, right.
he was doing something to a bridge, which makes
I
me
mean, he is
think,
civilian, but so he's more like a spy saboteur or whatever, right?
yeah,
But in war, it is war. I mean, I keep saying I don't think you ever murder people. I mean, you could toss them in a camp, although was it Andersonville? That's a Confederate camp in Georgia where they put the Union soldiers they captured and was just like, one of those hell on earth sort of spots.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost like maybe hanging someone's nicer than throwing them into a war prison camp.
Uh, yeah, maybe.
I don't know. I guess you get to continue if you go to the camp, though. Hey, I didn't live in the 1860s. I don't know how this works. But
Yeah, I would assume
that
that if
that's
you go to
that's
a
why it's
camp,
so
you're like,
easy just to be like in the story we know he's a plantation scumbag. So yeah, let's hang him, you know? It's hanging time.
yeah. I mean, yeah, basically it is hanging time.
But
High noon.
but if we take only what we see in the film, which is he lives in a big white house with his wife and nobody else. Maybe they have a kid, I don't know, but
Yeah,
they just live there. He did. I mean, in any case, he was screwing around with the bridge. We do know that.
yeah. There's clearly there's a big giant gate at the front, so yeah, there's like no way that he's a decent person with that much money. You know what I mean? Just go ahead and say like if you have a
1860s
gate,
South.
if you have like a 60-foot gate in front of your property and you live in the South and Union soldiers want to hang you, then you're probably a piece of garbage.
I mean, maybe that would have since they were making a movie of it anyway. I wonder if well, no, you can't change the location. Yeah, I guess I find that
What?
it's more interesting when we have a more anonymous everyman. Which the more you think about this one, the more it's like, yeah, no, he's got a mustache. He probably twirls or a
I mean,
beard
what
he
if it
twirls.
was just a French guy who was being hanged by French soldiers and they were there was no war involved. It was just like a French guy who they hung.
Oh yeah, well
And
that's the thing in France where it's like they stop the train and drag the suspect off the train and beat the crap out of him.
yeah,
Which
well,
is I've heard stories of that occurring. Just hey, we got our man doing our thing,
that would have been a lot different. But it's
but they're
kind
not
of
hanging that guy. I
interesting.
don't believe.
What's kind of interesting, this is kind of the only Twilight I think the only Twilight Zone episode that like the whole thing is just one big execution.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? That's kind of interesting itself.
that is the eerie thing at the start where the execution is done in total silence. Like I really was thinking like, oh, is this whole thing going to be dialogue free? Which it basically is, but that makes things especially weird that nobody's talking. You know.
Yeah.
I
Um
like when they have like the sergeant of arms coming out and like reading from a parchment about the edict that had been broken, or he could just read the sign. It's right there.
Yeah, I mean it's it was given to us for a reason. So I'm gonna just say that guy sucks and he should be in the death, I
Here's the
guess.
big one. Buster Keaton's the general, great movie, but yeah, he's a
Hmm.
Confederate protagonist in that, and he's a Confederate hero in that, which makes the movie kind of weird.
When was that made? Like 1920 something?
23, 24, 25, somewhere around there, mid 20s. So, very, I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
certainly, it doesn't make you cringe like watching Birth of a Nation or anything, because it doesn't
Well,
really delve into the actual politics of the Civil War. It's just that your hero happens to be, on the Confederate side, and he happens to be saving this train or whatever, and, blah, blah.
hmm.
It doesn't get into anything politics, but the end of that movie did make me think of that because it's a sequence involving a bridge, in that case with the train coming, of course. But
Yeah.
that's where they total a train. Spoiler for a 100-year-old
Haha.
movie.
Nice. I
um,
mean, people were weird. People were very weird about the Civil War in the 20s.
yeah. Not of course the movie is like an absolute classic. It's still entertaining to watch, but yeah, the
Yeah.
politics of it's a little weird. So, um, let's put this on the tripometer. Of course, 0 is not trippy. 5 is very trippy.
I am I hope this is not like overly generous, but I think I'm going to give this a 4.7
Ooh, okay. Why?
because it's very trippy and the extra I don't want to make it top tier because it doesn't have like robots or anything,
Hmm.
I guess, or space, but I think it is trippy as hell. And
Okay.
that's like the entire and part of it is just most of the things that we give a high tripometer to, like I don't know, shadow play, you could take a big chunk of that out that isn't trippy. Like the trippiness isn't the entire, but like this is just the whole thing. Like it's all trippy.
Yeah, for me, I'm giving it a 3. Most of my trippy thoughts are due to the film design, like the sound design, the cinematography, the music. That stuff is all trippy. Like I said, it's kind of a crappy fantasy he's having there, and the Civil War itself to me tends to take away from my tripometers, you know. This is, pretty like for me, Still Valley is still trippier just because, and I don't remember exactly what I gave it on the tripometer. If I gave it less,
Hmm.
whatever. But yeah, for that one, I mean, just the guy screaming out being a witch man and weird magic. For me, that's kind of trippier. But in terms of like production, yeah, this one's way trippier.
I mean, I think I like Still Valley better. That it's like Still Valley was just really fun, but
Yes,
I
yes.
just I'm just yeah, like I said, I'm just mostly thinking in terms of that this is just like trippy all the way through. Like there's not very much to ground you, which is kind of
I guess
exciting
I'm
because
grounded
nothing
by
else
the
does
Civil
that.
War. The Civil War grounds me.
Yeah. Well, also it's all nature and it all makes kind of makes sense and it's yeah, there's no like afterlife or anything. There's no angels, there's no devils, but
Except for
um
this guy, if you read the short story.
yeah. Yeah, it's just I appreciate I don't know, I was reading up on Ambrose Bierce and it said that he worked as a printer's devil in abolitionist paper.
Ah.
So that's an actual title.
Although, well, that's the Union executioner executes the guy, so yeah, he's that's a bit scummy, I guess. Just I don't know.
No, man, he's doing his job. He's
Yeah,
following orders.
yeah. That's always that's all that excuse
That's
always
always an
works.
excuse.
Hey, if it worked in Nuremberg.
Oh, it's gonna be working overtime probably.
Right.
Um,
I guess we'll wind this one down then. Uh, Unless you wanted to spit out some other spew on this ep.
I think this is cool, and maybe I will try to watch more French short films from the '60s. I don't know if that's a thing or not.
I think it's a thing.
I
I mean,
mean,
the director
I
made 2 more Pierce stories, so you got those
yeah,
going for
that
you, if
is
nothing
true.
else.
was gonna say I just don't know how accessible all that stuff is, but I guess it's probably accessible if it won an Oscar and stuff.
Because I think this got anthologized itself. I was
Hmm.
seeing, I couldn't connect. Oh, could de la vie. I don't know if I'm
Yep.
saying that right, but that is okay. That is all of this guy. That's how you watch all three of his stories, with Chickamauga and the Mockingbird being the other stories he did. So,
Please, it's Shikamoga.
is it okay?
Shikam. No, I'm just, just messing with
I don't know. I've been
you. No,
mispronouncing half the words I've been saying in this podcast, so
Chickamauga is
I'll take
not a French
corrections.
word.
Well, I know there's Chickamauga. Chickamauga, is that the battlefield north
Yep,
of Atlanta? Okay.
that's surely what it's referring to.
Yeah, this looks like it's spelled differently though. Maybe it's a French thing. Or maybe
Shikamoga.
it's
No,
just a
they probably
misspelling.
it could be a misspelling on the Wikipedia or whatever.
I don't know. Okay. As for us, we are Time Enough Podcast. You can find us at podcastios for a whole bunch of podcasting, or at podcastios on Patreon if you want to throw us a dime. Mark and I and our regular co-host Luke chat up really good and really bad films according to IMDb users on Films and Filth. And hey, Mark, you're there for podcast 1999, where we are currently talking about the Planet of the Apes TV series.
Also French.
Yeah. What? Huh?
Well, the original book was French.
Oh, right. I was like, that's a pretty Hollywood series. Okay, or Burbank, I guess, whatever. And for the gamers, there's Luke Loves Pokemon, Monster Mash, and the Game Show.
Yep.
Snap! This
Um,
podcast didn't happen. It was just your fantasy. Now you're dead.
I wanted to see my wife.
Okay.
You can cut before or after that, whatever.
Yeah. I will stop the recording then.